Hello, I'm Alex Jones, and I'm here to talk to you today about suffering. Now, let's face it, we all suffer. And I know that sucks. There's a lot more to suffering than just having a day that sucks. In fact, the whole project is about why suffering sucks and what lens has most to do about suffering. Now, one culture very familiar with suffering and their beliefs would be the Buddhists. In fact, the whole idea around their religion is suffering. In fact, to them, suffering is your entire life. You suffer when you leave the house. You suffer when you come back to the house. You suffer, you suffer, you suffer. I know. That sucks. Now, we all know being a Buddhist must really suck because your entire life is about suffering. However, I'm not just here to discuss the Buddhist lens. I'm here to discuss a play through the Buddhist lens. This particular play I want to talk about is Hamlet. Now, the whole storyline is based on suffering. In fact, everyone in the play suffers in some form or another. Now, keep in mind, there are many different forms of suffering. For example, However, this is just a more straightforward approach to what suffering is. There are other forms of suffering, but we don't have time to discuss those other forms of suffering. You're probably thinking, Alex, get to the point. Get back to Hamlet. I know, I kind of veered off the path a little bit. And that sucks. Hamlet is a story all about suffering. In fact, it starts out with two guards, which are basically Hamlet's friends, seeing a ghost, which is actually a reminder of suffering. This ghost was in fact Hamlet's father, and his entire speech to Hamlet was about suffering. And he even ends it on a solemn note saying that he must return to fire and torture, which is suffering. I know he's burning away in some creepy dark pit, and you know what? That really sucks. Sadly, there are no scenes as happy as this in Hamlet. However, there is nature in the play. There is one scene that celebrates nature in a sick way. When Ophelia hangs herself over the river. Yeah, I know. The lady dies. That sucks. Hey, it doesn't matter the way you slice it. Anytime you flip through the pages of Hamlet, the first couple words that come to mind are suffering and death. Suffering, death, suffering, 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 death, blah 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 blah, suffering, death, suffering, death, suffering, death, suffering, death, suffering, 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 blah 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 blah, suffering, 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 suffering. Ugh. Death. Death, 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 death. Sucks to be them. Alright, so recap. Hamlet is not a very happy story. Everyone in the story ends up suffering one way or another, and if you don't see them suffer in the story, they're going to suffer later on. Basically everyone dies, and I know with an ending like that, it really sucks. But you know what sucks more than knowing how badly it ends and seeing all these people die is having to be the one to tell you about it. Well, hey, that's this project, that's life, and that sucks.